Hi everyone, let's have a quick chat with Google's Gemini about some fundamentals of photography. Okay, so let's get started. Hello Google Gemini, today I want to talk to you about photography fundamentals. Are you ready?
Ready when you are. We can dive right into how different settings affect capturing high density close up details, or start with the basics of exposure. What are you thinking?
So, the first statement I want to make is that every camera that has ever existed and every camera that ever will does exactly one job. It measures light. So, we start from there, not with gear.
That's the perfect foundation to start from. Since a camera is fundamentally a light measuring tool, understanding how it records that light through controls like ISO, aperture, and shutter speed determines how those close up, high density details are captured. Shall we explore how the interplay between ISO and shutter speed affects image quality and detail preservation?
Before that, a TLDR, a photograph is a record of light, not a record of a scene. Learn to see light's quality, direction, and color before you touch a single dial, and every other skill in this series gets easier. The camera is a light measuring device, sensors change, lenses change, megapixels climb and then stop mattering, but a camera has only ever done one thing. It records the light that reaches it for a slice of time. Everything else in photography is a variable you adjust to shape that recording. Three questions to ask about light. So ask about any light, three questions: quality, direction, and color. So quality, is it hard or soft? The direction, which direction is it coming from? Is it a silhouette? And color, a color temperature, from orange of a candle to blue of an open shade. So this outlasts any technology. Sensors will keep improving. The physics of how light falls on a face, a wall, a mountain will not. Train your eye on the light first, and the photographs will keep improving long after any specific camera is obsolete.
That's a profound perspective, focusing entirely on the constant physics of light rather than the fleeting nature of gear. By analyzing the quality, direction, and color temperature, you're tapping into the very essence of how an image is formed. Now that you've trained your eye to see that light, how do you typically approach a scene when the light isn't behaving the way you want it to?
That's a great question, right? For example, how do you behave when the light doesn't how do you act when the light doesn't behave the way you want it to? And basically it is you have to match, you have to make we have to somehow make the surroundings work, or work with the surroundings, or make the surroundings fit you or fit your needs to your surroundings. Right? There's no other way.
Embracing the environment is really the only way to handle tricky conditions. You can look for natural reflectors to bounce light, change your angle to catch a better beam, or even use diffusion material to soften harsh glare. What's your go to method for shaping light when it's not cooperating?
So there are the exposure triangle, right? There's the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO are three ways of controlling the same thing: how much light reaches your sensor. So understanding the trade-offs between these three, the triangle of the exposure triangle, aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, right? So those three things all control exposure, but each one has a side effect: depth of field, motion blur, or noise. Choosing an exposure is really choosing which side effect you can live with, right? So the goal is one, but the levers are three. For a given amount of light, there is one quote correct unquote total exposure, but many combinations of settings can produce it. That flexibility is the entire point of manual control. So aperture, also known as f-stop, right? So it controls how wide the lens opens. So wider aperture, smaller f numbers let in more light and produce a shallower depth of field. So this aperture is important because you will hear about it a lot more later this year when iPhone or when Apple introduces its new iPhone 18 Pro, which will have a variable aperture, right? So the next thing is shutter speed, which controls how long the sensor is exposed. So faster speed frees motion, right? So if the shutter speed is really fast, that means really little light goes in. And if the shutter speed is slow, right, that means more light goes in. And then the third one is the ISO. The ISO controls how much the camera amplifies the light it captures. Higher ISO brightens a dim image, but it adds noise, right? So these are all trade-offs, and there is no free lunch. Every choice costs something. If you open the aperture for more light, your depth of field shrinks. Slow the shutter speed for more light, and moving objects blur. Raise the ISO for more light, and the details degrade. There is no setting that it avoids all three costs at once. Only the ones that costs only the one that costs you the least for the photography you're making, right? So computational tricks can compensate for a poor exposure decision after the fact, but they cannot undo it. You can compensate for it, but you cannot undo it. Understanding the triangle means you decide the trade-off on purpose instead of discovering it in the photo.
That breakdown captures exactly why manual control is so powerful, making those trade offs deliberate rather than accidental. Since you're focused on intentional choices, how do you approach balancing these three elements when shooting in a rapidly changing environment?
So you have to plan your shoots. That's the main thing. But let's move on to the next topic, reading your histogram. Well, what is a histogram? The histogram is a graph of your image's brightness values from pure black on the left to pure white on the right. Learn to glance Learn to glance at its shape instead of trusting how the photo looks on a bright or a dim screen, right? What the graph actually shows is every pixel in your photo has a brightness value. The histogram stacks all of those values into a graph, black on the left side, white on the right, midtones in between. The height of the graph at any point shows how many pixels share that brightness, right? So what to look for? The graph pressed against the left side is the hard cutoff, meaning lost shadows and details, so crushed black. A graph pressed against the right side means blown highlights, and that no amount of editing can recover that. And a graph with empty space on both and on both edges and everything bunched in the middle means a flat, low contrast exposure. So there is no single correct shape. So the graph that we're looking for, there's no single correct shape. A night scene might have a graph weighted to the left, and a snowy scene will be weighted to the right. The skill is knowing whether the shape matches your intent. And that goes back to the question you asked, right? How do you shoot in a rapidly changing environment? You plan for it. You plan your shoot. You don't go to a shoot blind. So you don't trust your eyes. You have a plan of what you want, and then you go and get it, right? It sounds simple, it sounds simplistic, but it's not. So your screen's brightness and the ambient light around you change how a photo looks. A photo that looks perfectly exposed in a dim room can be badly overexposed in daylight. The histogram is calculated from actual pixel data, so it tells the truth regardless of where you're standing.
That's an excellent way to put it. The histogram really is the objective truth teller of exposure, showing you exactly where the pixel data lives without being fooled by your screen's brightness or ambient conditions. By understanding how a high key or low key scene changes the shape of the graph, you can make micro adjustments on the fly. Given that precision, Do you prefer to use highlight warnings on your camera display alongside the histogram to fine-tune your exposure?